In this video, we're going to go through some basic branching with IntelliJ and GitHub. So let's start in IntelliJ first. And we make sure that we've got the project that we used in the previous video. And that's our Python project that we ultimately forked from GitHub. So I'm just going to close down some of these files. Okay, so how do we go about branching in IntelliJ? Well, we've got two options to get there. We can either come up here and click on VCS, then select Git, then select Branches. And that brings up the Git Branches dialog box, and from there we can start working with branches. But the second option that I think is preferable and more convenient is this option down here. You see where it says Git Master? You can click on that. And when you do that, the Git Branches dialog box pops up as well. And you can do the same as you could on that other screen. So it's personal preference, but I tend to use this one down the bottom. So now that we've got this one open, let's click on New Branch. Okay, so the branches come up. And what we're going to do is call this branch branch-L. Now the reason I'm putting a -L there is purely to say that we're going to be using this one on the local branch only. And because we're going to be experimenting with local and remote branches, we want to know that just at a glance at the name of the branch, whether it's a local or a remote one. Now normally you'd name this branch something to do with the reason you're creating a branch. For example, if you're creating a new version of an application, you might call it the name of the new version. Something along those lines. But in this case, branch-L is the name we're going to call it. I'm going to click on that. And notice when it did that, down the bottom it tells us that branch L was created, but also over here to the right, you can see that branch L is now the current branch. So basically when you create a branch, IntelliJ will switch you to that branch as well. So do watch out for these helpful green pop-ups telling you what's happened, because it can be really useful just to confirm that something that you assumed has happened has actually happened, and yeah, it's very good to keep track of. All right, so how do we switch now to another branch? Well, that's quite easy. We just click on this little box again, and we can come down and choose here, Master, Origin Master if we want to. Click on that and select Checkout. That moves us back to Git Master, which was the repository we started off with at the start of this video. All right, so let's create another branch this time. So I'm going to click on the button again, New Branch. I'm going to call this branch branch-LR-1. Now here the LR suffix indicates that the branch is going to be involved in both local and remote operations, and you'll see that as we go through this video. So I'm going to click on OK. That automatically selects the branch, and again if it wasn't selected for some reason, you would just come up here and you select the branch that you wanted to work on and click on Checkout. But in this case you can see down the bottom of the dialog box it says current branch, branch LR1, so we're actually in the right place. Alright, so now that we're in the branch LR1, let's now push the local branch to GitHub. So we're going to push the branch LR1 to GitHub. So to do that, we go up to VCS, Git, Push. And you can see at the top of the dialog box, it's telling you what's going to happen. Branch-LR1, and we've got the arrow pointing right. It's going to go to the origin, and then plus branch LR1. The plus here means that it's going to be created on the remote repository, which in this case, of course, is GitHub. So let's go and, or let's click push first. You can see it's pushing down the bottom. And it gives us helpful indication. Push to branch LR1 to new branch, origin/branch-LR1. And again, if you recall, origin is our remote repository on GitHub. So that's pushed it correctly. So let's now open a browser and go to GitHub, and we'll see if that branch is there. github.com. We'll go into our Python repository, click on branches. There's two ways of doing it. First, we can click on branches, and we can see that the master branch was created 2 hours ago. That's what I did the previous video. And your branch, branch LR1, is the new one from the push that I did just about 30 seconds to a minute ago. And just in case you're wondering, well, how come it says it's 2 hours ago? Well, that's because the branch LR1 hasn't got any changes. It's identical to master. We've just created a new branch. We didn't make any changes. So it's equivalent to, it's identical to the master branch. All right, so I'm going to go back to the main Python repository. The other thing you can select the branch from here as well. You can click on master or branch LR1 there. And when you do that, it changes it. And then based on the actual files you've selected, it'll be showing the files that are appropriate for that particular branch. All right, so clearly we can see that the branch LR1 got successfully pushed from the local repository to GitHub. So the question you might be asking now is, why would you bother pushing a branch in GitHub? And again, a scenario there would be creating a new version of a software package or a new feature, and you might also want to be maintaining the current version. So let's just say in the case of a new version of the Mac operating system, they might have in GitHub, they might have a private repository of the entire operating system code, and that needs to be maintained because new updates for that version come out on a regular basis. But when a new version of the operating system comes out, they also might want to create a branch so that they can start working on that. And so therefore they can be coding the new version that is due to come out in the future while still maintaining the current version. So that's a very common use for a branch, is to have two different branches, bearing in mind that you can merge some or all of the code at a later point in time. But if you didn't create a separate branch, you can imagine the chaos. You'd be having new features from the new unreleased version of the operating system in the same code base as the code that's released for the current version of the operating system. So clearly you wouldn't want to do that. So that's an example of why you would actually create a branch. And we are going to be talking about other merging in the next video. And obviously in the case of a pull, if you just purely wanted to share the code and you didn't have two separate versions as I've just identified, then maybe a pull request would be better. But in this particular case, we were actually using branches, and I've given you the reasons why that could be quite useful. All right, so let's go ahead and create a branch now on GitHub. And we're going to simulate another developer having created that branch so that we can pull down that change, that new branch, into our local repository. So the way to create a new branch on GitHub is to select this option here, branch, and click on in the little box here, because notice how it says find or create a branch. We can type in branch -r. And notice when I started typing, we've now got this option to create branch R. And here R is signifying remote, since we're going to be using this branch only for remote operations, and you'll see why shortly. I click on create branch, and you can see I've now got 3 branches, and the current branch is now branch R, has been selected, and you can now choose the other ones if we so desire. All right, so let's create a second branch now. We'll call this one branch -LR2. Same way, and you click on create branch. And we've now got 4 branches. Now the LR2 is meant to indicate local and remote. So we're going to be using this particular branch in both remote and local operations. All right, so let's go back into IntelliJ now. And let's go back and now and click on VCS git fetch. Okay, fetched was successful. And notice what happened down here. And so it's always useful to have the console open to see what's happened. New branch LR2, new branch branch R. Now they're the 2 branches that we created when we were in GitHub. And obviously nothing was merged here because we didn't make any changes. This is purely the branches only. We just synced our local repository with the remote branch references that we created on GitHub. All right, so now let's come over here and click on this git branch, this little option down the bottom right hand corner again. And now we've got a lot more options, as you can see showing up there. So there's 2 sections in the branches. We've got local branches, as you can see there, and we've also got remote branches. But there can be 3 possibilities. So the first one would be a branch that appears in both sections, and that means that it exists locally and has been pushed up to GitHub, or the branch lived on GitHub and has been pulled or fetched into our local repository. The second type is one that appears in local branches, and that means that it exists in the local repository but hasn't yet been pushed to GitHub. And the third type is a branch that appears in the remote branches only section, meaning that it exists in the remote repository only, but has been fetched but not pulled locally and has remote references to it in the local repository. So in the case of the various ones we're here, we've got branch L. This is a type 2. So it appears in the local branches, but not in the remote branches. We've also got down here, we've got LR1. And look, noticing down here, our current branch is LR1, which is why we can't see that under the local branches. But if we change to another branch, like for example, branch L, check that out, then come down here and click on it again. Notice now that we've got LR1 showing in both local branches and remote branches, which is consistent because if you recall, that was the repository that we actually sent up to GitHub, and the GitHub's actually got that reference. So just to confirm, we've got the LR1. So that came ultimately from our local repository. And we've got this origin branch R, which is purely a remote branch only. That was the one that we created purely on GitHub. We've got LR2, which is currently showing us a remote only, but we're going to make that into a local one shortly. Then of course the original one was origin master. That's the remote reference of the local master, which was created when we first pushed our repository to GitHub. So we've now fetched this branch LR2. So let's actually check that out now. It's a new branch, it's a new local branch, which means it's going to live locally as well. So it's going to become a local and a remote branch. So click on that, check out its local branch. The name would be the same name, but you could override that if for some reason you wanted to. This is the name that the remote branch is going to become in the new local branch. And we've now selected that. So if I click on this list now, we won't see LR2 in the local branches because it's the current one, as you can see down here. But we'll just choose another one like branch L, check that out, and come back here again. You can see we've now got branch LR2 showing in both local and also showing in remote. And that's because it now lives both in the local repository and also the remote repository on GitHub. All right, so how do we go about deleting a remote branch reference? Well, that's actually pretty easy to do. We can actually just come down here, like for example, this branch R under the remote branch, we can click on that. We can click on delete. Do we want to delete the remote branch reference, origin/branch R? Click on delete. That's now removed it. So, and you can see down here, it's given us an update as to what it's actually done there with the push command. We come back here and refresh. One branch has been deleted and the branch R no longer exists in the list of remote branches. Okay, back to IntelliJ. So how do we delete a branch like LR2 that's synced up on both the local repository and the remote repository? What we need to do is first delete the remote reference. So come over here, the remote reference to LR2 by deleting it. And notice when I select that option, we get this option to also delete the tracking or delete tracking of the local branch LR2 as well. So you could delete two in the one hit there. So I'm going to select that and click on delete. So it's deleting it from the local repository as well as the remote. And again, the pop-up is helpfully telling us what's happened there anyway as well. So it's saying that it's deleted the remote branch -LR2 from the remote repository as well as the local one. And confirming that now, we can see that it's disappeared from both. And let's confirm on GitHub by reloading. And I've got that error here because I was in the branch LR2 and that's now been deleted. That's sort of confirmation that it was deleted. So if I delete that part of the URL and go back to the main URL for this particular repository, we'll see that we've got two branches. If I select the branches now, we've only got the branch LR1 and master. And that's consistent with what's in IntelliJ. And IntelliJ hasn't got the LR2 anymore. All right, so that's how you go about working with branches in IntelliJ. In the next video of this section, we're going to look at basic merging using branches in IntelliJ. So I'll see you in that next video.